Med anledning av Nelson Mandelas besök i Stockholm sänder vi nu ett aktuellt special.
God afton och välkomna till Aktuellt special. Nelson Mandela är tillbaka på Haga slott nu efter en lång dag. Överläggningar med statsminister Ingvar Carlsson på Rosenbad, en stor presskonferens, tal i riksdagen och en gudstjänst i Uppsala domkyrka. I sitt tal i riksdagen krävde han fortsatta sanktioner och vid presskonferensen gick han längre. Han ville ha utökade sanktioner och han ville också att Sverige och andra länder skulle bryta de diplomatiska förbindelserna med Sydafrika. Den sydafrikanska utrikesministern Botha har redan reagerat med att säga att han inte förstår vad Nelson Mandela menar och att han inte tror att den sydafrikanska regeringen låter sig påverkas. I en intervju för Aktuellt går Nelson Mandela närmare in på frågan om sanktioner. Men vi ska börja i riksdagens andra kammarsal och Nelson Mandelas tal nu i eftermiddags.
Mr. Speaker, Honorable Prime Minister and members of the government, esteemed leaders of parties, distinguished members of the Swedish Parliament, friends, ladies and gentlemen, it is a matter of the greatest joy to me that I have at last arrived in Sweden. It will come as no surprise to you that for me, this is the first time ever that I have occasion to utter even one word in any parliament, anywhere. This is therefore an historic day for us. It foretells of the moment when black men and women will sit side by side with white men and women in a South African parliament, together adopting laws as equals and as elected representatives of all the people of our country. But it is also a joyful day which shall remain in our memories for as long as we live. It is joyful because we know that here we are among steadfast friends who have stood with us in the common struggle for decades. The national Swedish sentiments have led to the very happy situation in which, between us, we have established a system of relations from people to people. This is a relationship that transcends the important structured official relations which define our extensive system of cooperation. It provides the warmth of human friendship among peoples that cements these official ties. Mr. Speaker, we have a vision of South Africa as a united, democratic, non-sexist, and non-racial country. We see ourselves as not aligned to any military blocs. At the same time, we shall be firmly aligned with regard to the fundamental and universal issues of human rights for all people, the right and possibility of every individual to full and unfettered development, the right of every country to determine its future, protection of the environment, and peace in a world that should be free of regional conflicts and the threat of a nuclear war. We believe that the people of this country share this glorious vision as well. It is this which has nullified the great distances that separate our respective countries and peoples, with the one in Northern Europe and the other in Southern Africa. We have become political neighbors who willingly share whatever little bread and salt we may have. The strength this gives us is impossible to measure. It is between us, common cause, that we have not yet ended the apartheid crime against humanity. Consequently, the conditions do not yet exist for our people to transform their country into a non-racial democracy. We together have therefore some important tasks to accomplish. We have to continue the struggle to liberate ourselves. This we are doing and shall pursue without regard to the cost to ourselves as individuals. We must, through struggle, end the system of apartheid as soon as possible. It remains our wish that we could, without delay, produce a just solution arrived at through a negotiated political settlement. Whether this happens and how soon will depend on what the Pretoria regime does. As yet, it has not even completed the process of creating a climate conducive to negotiations. As you know, we shall be meeting President F.W. de Klerk and his colleagues to address this issue as soon as the necessary arrangements have been completed. We are convinced that the Harare and United Nations declarations on South Africa provide the basis for the speedy liquidation of the apartheid system. We need your continued support in the struggle to abolish the system of white minority domination and exploitation, which has brought such untold misery to both our own people and those of Southern Africa as a whole. We would like to take this opportunity to salute this outstanding democratic institution, the Swedish Parliament, which has stood in the front ranks of the international forces that have fought against the apartheid system. From here, has issued legislation which has made an important contribution to the process of securing the international isolation of apartheid South Africa. For many years, you have approved budgets which have enabled this country to extend invaluable humanitarian assistance to the ANC, the democratic movement, and the suffering people of our country. From here, you have provided moral and political leadership, which has inspired many others throughout the world and sustained us in those dark days in prison, when it was impossible even to guess when the terrible night of racial tyranny would give way to a new dawn. We thank you for all this with all our hearts and without reservation. But the fact of the continued existence of apartheid system requires that we ask you to persist in the path on which you have embarked. To help us end apartheid, you must continue to apply sanctions. You have to provide our people with the humanitarian assistance which we so urgently need. You must continue to provide moral and political leadership. It is precisely your unwavering commitment to these positions that guarantees a speedy end to the apartheid system. The road we still have to traverse will not be long. It may not be smooth and easy, but clearly the racist tyranny is on its way out. White South Africa has elected its last racial parliament and its last apartheid president. Our deepest desire is that we walk the last mile together. And having done that, we shall, as one, look at the new vistas that will open up and see how we should exploit our established friendship to extend and deepen mutually beneficial cooperation between our peoples. New challenges are upon all people throughout the world. Old problems demand urgent solutions. New problems have to be addressed without delay. The times demand a greater and not less cooperation among the nations to find solutions to issues that might be national, in their specific expression, but universal in their essence. It should surely be possible that we, who have joined hands to bring to a close the old detestable world of white racial oppression, should combine to contribute whatever little we can to answer those challenges. In a week's time, Namibia will become an independent state. We are greatly moved by the fact of the enormous contribution you made to the achievement of this victory. Among other things, through your support for SWAPO, we look forward to meeting in Windhoek, if not all, at least some of you. This is a victory that is close to our hearts. We rejoice in the joy of the Namibian people. We have to contribute to the fullness of this historic success by making certain that we end apartheid in our own country, create the conditions for peace, to rule supreme throughout our region, and enable the peoples of Southern Africa as a whole to rebuild their countries as partners in development and allies for justice. When that day comes, it will be with a special warmth that the millions of our people will receive the Swedish participants at our victory celebrations. We thank you and thank the millions who you represent for making it possible for us to say unashamedly that we have a true friend whose name is Sweden. We are most grateful to you for inviting us to speak here today. We are humbled by the attention you have paid to our simple message. Thank you.
Det är faktiskt bara en månad sedan Nelson Mandela lämnade Victor Verster-fängelset. En månad omtumlande för honom själv och för omgivningen. För sitt första besök utanför Afrika valde han Sverige, och det främsta skälet var att han ville överlägga med ANC:s president Oliver Tambo som vårdas här efter ett slaganfall. Igår möttes de på Haga slott. Den här bilden togs då. Det var ett möte som båda sett fram emot, men också ett möte viktigt för ANC:s ledning. Aktuellt träffade Nelson Mandela på Haga slott efter talet i riksdagen, och så här berättade han om mötet med Oliver Tambo.
I was frankly very concerned before I saw him. But when I met him and discovered that he was not as bad as I had thought, I was very happy indeed. And since then, the tension inside me has lessened, in fact has disappeared.
I was told that it was a meeting free of sentimentality and full of laughs. Is that right?
Well, it may be that people succeed in hiding their true feelings, but it was emotional. But at the same time, we were very happy to be together. And I can't explain my delight at meeting him and seeing that he has got a chance of playing, of giving his wisdom and leadership to the organization.
Have you had time to get down to talks with him about all the challenges ahead?
We did exchange views yesterday, and we had hoped to continue today, but of course the program has been rather tight, and we will take the earliest opportunity of resuming our conversation.
One of the issues you have to discuss is that about the armed struggle. When would you be prepared to give it up? Is it necessary, for instance, to have a ceasefire agreement with the government in Pretoria?
Well, the reasons which compelled us to turn to violence are still there. The conditions are still identical. Although the ANC has now been legalized, but apartheid is still there. There is still a state of emergency. We can't do what we like. Our people are still in exile, and others are still in prison. And therefore, we cannot take advantage of the unbanning of the organization because of these conditions which still exist. And therefore, all the strategies which we have formulated are still appropriate and in place.
Another question, important question, is that about sanctions. You have today asked for more sanctions. Couldn't that be counterproductive?
I do not think so, because one of the things we have been consistent about is that of sanctions. We have never hesitated in saying that until apartheid is scrapped in its totality, we will continue to call for sanctions. And if, therefore, there have been moves to bring the government and the ANC together, that move has been made in full knowledge of our approach generally, and in particular on the question of sanctions. So our continuing to demand what we have been demanding all along can never be counterproductive.
But there are people who would argue that F.A. de Klerk needs some kind of encouragement at the moment if he's going to be able to carry through his program of reforms.
If we are to encourage him, then we must be in a position to give that encouragement. An organization whose members are in exile and whose members are still in prison can never be able to undertake that task. If Mr. de Klerk wants us to help him, let us be an organization just like the National Party. Let us be able to function politically. Let us be able to carry our own membership with us in whatever we propose to do. He has placed us in a position whereby we cannot undertake the task.
You have today also asked for countries to sever diplomatic links with South Africa. What could that achieve?
Well, that is part of the strategy of isolating South Africa. We have achieved a great deal through sanctions, and it is well known that isolation of South Africa is part of our strategy, and therefore to cut diplomatic ties with South Africa is consistent with a policy which we have advocated for some time now.
At the same time, I'm sure that many anti-apartheid activists in South Africa would argue that over the years, diplomatic contacts have been very useful in their struggle.
Well, we have nevertheless declared our policy that we would prefer South Africa to be completely isolated until fundamental changes occur.
Of course, if the government moves fast enough now, then you could change that policy, I'm sure.
If a fundamental change takes place, then we will re-examine all our strategies.
All of them?
All our strategies will have to be re-examined. But that can only take place when a fundamental change in the policy of the government occurs.
What needs to be done now to start talks about talks?
The government must meet the outstanding preconditions. It must allow exiles to return under a general amnesty. It must release all political prisoners. The government must lift the state of emergency in its totality. If the government takes those moves, then the conditions will be conducive to negotiation. And when we sit down to negotiate, compromises are possible.
I met Foreign Minister Pickbota in Cape Town recently, and he said, look, we want to make friends with them. Do you think that's genuine, that you really want to make friends with you?
I think so. My experience in the course of my discussions with the government have convinced me that at least the state president and the two ministers with whom I have been in contact are genuine in their statements that they want change, and their acceptance that that change is not possible if an agreement is not made with the ANC. That, in my view, is a correct perception.
Do you see it as an advantage that you have met these ministers and talked to them now and you're planning the future strategy with the ANC leadership?
Oh yes, undoubtedly. I have been exposed to government officials in a manner no leader of the ANC has done. And that has therefore given me an advantage of being able to advise my organization as to their responses on the question of negotiation. Yes, it has been a positive advantage.
How do you see the so-called black-on-black violence in South Africa?
That has been a source of concern to me inside prison. And I have made every effort to help in settling this issue. In my view, this issue could never be settled without reaching an agreement with Dr. Buthelezi and the Inkatha movement. But it is clear that the whole situation now has been affected by the fact that so many people have lost their beloved ones. And it's not easy for people to look at the problem objectively. They are now involved in one way or the other. And that has made the solution very difficult to find. But I am happy to say that everybody now understands that a meeting between the UDF-COSATU alliance on the one side and the Inkatha on the other is absolutely imperative. And in my speech to the rally in Natal, I called for peace between ourselves and Inkatha.
Were you surprised when some booed it, what you said?
Yes, I was not surprised. I expected it because people feel very strongly on this question. But nevertheless, I think the majority, the overwhelming majority of people in the rally and those who read the statement in the press and who listened to it over television and the radio seem to have responded very excellently. And I think that is a sign for hope. And when I go back, one of the first things I propose to do is to telephone Chief Buthelezi and arrange a meeting with him.
You don't seem to be afraid of saying things that could be unpopular?
No. Firstly, I don't act as an individual. I have an organization and a very competent and dedicated leadership. We discuss problems with them just as we have now discussed that speech at the rally. It was not a speech which expressed my own individual opinion. It was presenting now the attitude of the organization. And that is how we work. So there is no danger of me being isolated from the organization. And I don't think anybody now can talk of the ANC being isolated from the masses of the people in the country.
Nelson Mandela i en intervju tidigare idag. I intervjun visade han både hårdhet och flexibilitet. Det är helt klart att han nu tillsammans med ANCs ledning markerar organisationens förhandlingspositioner samtidigt som han antyder att kompromisser kommer att bli nödvändiga. Två krav återkom gång på gång. Ledarna och medlemmarna i exil måste få rätt att återvända till Sydafrika utan att riskera fängelse och bandlysning. De i Sydafrika fängslade måste släppas. Nelson Mandela ser uppenbarligen regeringspartiet, nationalistpartiet och ANC som de två viktigaste parterna och han kräver att ANC ska få möjlighet att agera politiskt på samma villkor. Men det framkom också att han inser att de två inte är de enda parterna, att en man som Zulu-ledaren Mangosuthu Buthelezi till exempel måste ges en roll i förhandlingar. Under veckan fortsätter överläggningar här i Stockholm. Vägen mot en uppgörelse torde bli lång, men den har i alla fall påbörjats. Aktuellt special är slut. Tack och god kväll.